welcome to the Lab Rats Entertainment Podcast. My name is Ezra, and I'm joined by Caleb Sawyer. How you guys doing today?
I'm doing good.
All right, yeah, we've got a kind of a truncated show this week. Not a lot going on. I wasn't expecting to say that at the top of this show. I was prepared to be like, oh man, we got this, and this to talk about. But if you didn't know, a Nintendo Direct happened yesterday, it was Wednesday, and
for the first time in what was it, 500 days or something?
500 days, and there was some stuff. I'm not gonna say there was nothing, but
exactly.
there wasn't a lot of super noteworthy stuff. So we're going to run down the big headlines, and then I'm going to have a brief topic, and then we're going to dive into sort of go back to one of our big weekly topics that we used to do. So that's what we're going to do. So the Nintendo Direct happened. It's been 500 days. I enjoyed watching it. But there really were only 4 big headlines, I think. The first was Mario Golf. Pretty cool, I guess. I'm not gonna get it because I don't care, but it's Mario Golf. People really like Mario Golf.
Yeah.
The next one is the No More Heroes 3 gameplay reveal.
Hype.
Which, yeah, Caleb or Sawyer, I don't know if you want to talk more about that, but that's a really beloved action franchise.
Yeah, I could. Do you want me to wait until you run through everything, or
No. Go ahead now.
Yeah. No More Heroes 3. So I've played a little bit of the first one. I was gonna play through both of them over the summer. I just didn't get a chance to. But from what I've played of the first one, they're very quirky action games that they're kind of like they break the fourth wall a lot. They don't play like how you'd think they would play. They're almost like spoof games, but they're really fun and have a good sense of humor. And so I've been the second one came out on the Wii in like 2010 or something like that. Like it's been years since we got a mainline title. And then there was that Travis Strikes Again like spin-off game that came out on the Switch in like 2017, something like that. And so everybody was like, oh, maybe this means if this does well, we might get a No More Heroes 3. And then that actually happened, and we got a third one. It looks great. Also, if you guys watched the trailer and you thought, this looks like a pretty good game, the first 2 are now available on the Switch eShop. I think they're like $15 each. And there's a lot of content in them, so definitely worth picking up. But looking forward to picking this one up. Probably gonna play through the first 2 first, just to get refreshed on the combat and the humor and everything else. Even though I'm sure these aren't exactly the most story-heavy games, but it looks great. It's finally gives me a reason to turn on my Switch again. I know that. Yeah, it's been a while. Like I think the last thing I played on there would have been I played Mario Galaxy HD. But before that, it probably would have been. Probably would have been Smash. If I'm being honest.
Wow. But, and you played that for like a few hours at launch and probably didn't really touch it.
I mean, I would play it with friends, but otherwise, like playing it solo. Once I beat the Spirit World or whatever it was called, I didn't touch it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I did compensate by playing, dozens of hours of Mario Galaxy. So that helped that.
Mario Galaxy.
Yep.
Deserves a better port.
I mean, just to have it in 1080p and at 60 FPS was enough for me.
That's fair. That's fair.
But,
all right, next headline.
I was just gonna say, if you guys thought it looked good, worth just downloading the original game on the Switch eShop for like $15 just to see if you like it, because it seems like it's going to be from that gameplay trailer. the same style of gameplay and humor, just updated for a new console with a new story. So yeah, I definitely recommend them, but they are definitely M-rated. So
Yeah.
language and it's very similar to Deadpool in terms of the sense of humor, in terms of that R-rated gross out kind of humor.
Definitely very, very M-rated.
Yes.
So be warned. Be warned. Parental advisory. All right, next big headline is The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD. Now, this is a contentious one. This is the only thing that they really announced for Zelda this year, which is kind of crazy because it's the 35th anniversary of Zelda. Actually, I believe Sunday of our recording this, so the 21st is Zelda's 35th anniversary. So a lot of people were expecting like, not necessarily Breath of the Wild 2 news. Like people were expecting that. I was kind of expecting it, but people were expecting that. But they were at least expecting, like a Zelda collection, a big blowout the way that Mario got, because it's Zelda. Zelda is if you don't count Pokemon, which you could or couldn't do, it depends on who you're talking to. Zelda is basically the second biggest Nintendo property, and uh everyone was kind of expecting a really massive blowout for Zelda this year, and at least based on this direct alone, that's not really what we're getting, because we're getting an HD remaster of a relatively contentious Zelda game. Like Skyward Sword is not the most beloved Zelda game of all time. And a pair of Joy-Cons, which look really cool. I kind of want to get them, but it's a controller. It's not a game. So I don't know what you guys thought of this. I'm torn about whether or not I'm going to get it myself, because I didn't finish Skyward Sword, and I just don't know if I really want to or not. So yeah, again, I'm happy to hear other thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm definitely planning on picking it up. I've been wanting to do like a big Zelda playthrough for a while of all of like the major games. And yeah, I'm glad to have, because I mean the Wii version for some reason is still like $50 depending on where you buy it from.
Man.
So I'm glad to see like an HD port of it. Also, I was watching that trailer, and when they said like, "Oh, we're also going to have a modernized control scheme," I got excited because I was like, "Finally, maybe I can just play it with like a regular gamepad." And then they like said, "Oh, well, we're going to map the the sword to the like
the
to the."
right stick.
Yeah, I was like, "What?" Like just like so.
I'm sorry, huh?
Yeah, so that let me down a little bit, but
Yeah.
I think it's like it still looks like a good game. I think really the control scheme is the only thing that kind of holds me back a little bit, but I'm sure I'll get used to it. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of motion controls, but I love Mario Galaxy, and that whole game is motion controls. So.
Yeah. I mean, I think that Skyward Sword, like the issues of that game are not the motion controls themselves, I guess, is kind of my feeling. I just think it has a really kind of sluggish feel about it in kind of the entire aspect of it. That, the original Wind Waker and Twilight Princess could definitely be said to have as well, but then the HD remasters fixed that. So, maybe Skyward Sword HD will have that that kind of change. The HD versions of these 3D Zelda games have always been pretty significant upgrades in my mind. So we'll see. Caleb, did you have any specific thoughts about Skyward Sword?
I felt that it's more of I'm happy for a port. I always like remasters and stuff coming to the next gen consoles and it's helpful, because some people are trying to get into the games and stuff, and they don't know where to start. So I'm always thankful for that.
Yeah.
But it's like we said, Zelda is having its what year is it?
35.
35th anniversary, and that Breath of the Wild 2 is in development, and for a while, and it is quite unfortunate to hear that they have no new updates from it, and the fact that it's probably not coming out this year. Probably not.
Yeah, probably
um,
not. I was
and
prepared to still say winter 2021 before the direct, but
mhm.
we'll see.
Yeah, I was the same thoughts, but and then I looked at the Age of Calamity DLC,
Yeah,
and
Age of Calamity DLC was a pretty hard tell. Like, yeah, no.
yeah, I so it's kind of like I almost feel like though they got to get this game out because un- unless but I think yeah, they got to get this game out because I'm pretty sure Nintendo's going to be coming out with a console soon. Just its life, the Switch's life is
20,
what?
2022 would be the last year for the Switch
Right.
in any normal circumstance, because it'll be 5 years in 2022. So
Mhm.
we'll see if it's maybe more like a Switch Pro situation, right? Something that's been talked about a lot.
Mhm.
Um, I'd be down for a more powerful Switch. I think that's what the
Mhm.
console really needs is better innards.
Yes.
Because it's just right now
It's still
it
successful.
feels well, it's successful. There are really great games on it. I don't want to downplay that fact, but
Mhm.
it does feel. I was thinking this a while ago actually. It does feel like the Zelda team is held back by the hardware that they're working on,
Mhm.
and uh, because like as beautiful as Breath of the Wild is, imagine it running on a PS4,
Right.
Yeah.
and uh, and like I would probably have zero issues with that game running on a PS4. Right now, it is a PS4 game trying to run on a PS3, and it just doesn't work properly.
Like I think for Nintendo, it's like I don't think in terms of third party now they've started to get better with the Switch, but in terms of third party on the ability of hardware, they have not quite been able to compete with Sony and Microsoft since the GameCube. Like the GameCube was pretty level hardware
Yeah,
wise with the PS2 and the Xbox.
I think, truth be told, it might have been more powerful than the PS2.
It might have been. I think really the GameCube's big downfall was the mini CDs.
Yeah,
That
the
was
GameCube just had just a lot of problems. It just
yeah.
wasn't, but it was still um yeah, like the I mean, I would say that the something that I think you could reasonably say you appreciate about that era is the fact that every game could pretty much run on every console.
Yeah.
So like, you know, the only reason there were so many PS2 exclusives is because if the PS2 was the biggest console, and if you were making a game for PS2, you were making it for PS2 and then porting it to other consoles, because that architecture wasn't particularly fun to work with based on what
Same
I
thing
saw.
happened with the Xbox 360 and everything else.
Yeah, exactly. So it was it's not um what's the way of putting this? It is kind of the fate of the GameCube that then led into the Wii needing to innovate. And that's where we are with Nintendo now, is a company that would prefer innovation over higher numbers. The problem is that basically all of their successes are just video games. They're just like basic video games that don't really rock the boat all that much in terms of like control innovation or something like that. Like I'm thinking in the past 3 years, I'm thinking of like Breath of the Wild, uh Xenoblade 2, Mario Odyssey, and like Fire Emblem Three Houses. And like none of those games from a control and like console innovation standpoint really challenge video games all that much. And that's fine. I'm happy with that. I'm not going to say that I hate that, but it does kind of start to feel like the lack of innovation in their games combined with this over innovation in their consoles, which has led to a significant power gap between the Switch and then the next gen consoles, does make it feel like some of these teams are held back a little bit. And I especially feel that way with the Zelda team. Most of their other franchises, like Mario can get away with it because Mario is always going to run well even on a subpar console, because it's not trying to be super realistic or super um, wide in scope. It's a Mario game, and Mario games aren't trying to be that. They're trying to be super solid platformers. And so it does. To wrap it back a little bit, it does feel like the Zelda team specifically is being held back a little bit. So I would like to see uh, a Switch Pro or something like that, just to kind of alleviate that feeling, so that even if Breath of the Wild doesn't run super well on the original Switch, it can run better on the Switch Pro. And so at least you have that option if you are bothered by that sort of thing.
Like I still think it's too early for like them to sunset the Switch and move over into a successor.
Yeah.
I see, if anything, I see the Switch becoming like how they did with the 3DS, where it's the 3DS family of consoles, rather than it just being, the Switch and then whatever sequel have out.
Well, and it turns out that if you do that, when you finally sunset your console, that console will be one of the greatest consoles of all time, because I have a new Nintendo 2DS, and the amount of games on that console justifies me keeping it around more than just the idea of being able to play one or two games.
Yeah.
Like having a new Nintendo 2DS is probably the best investment you could make for like a child, cuz you've got a ton of games, they're all really great. Maybe they're not the most cutting edge, but they are, they're probably the pinnacle of the handheld console library. And so, if they do the same thing with the Switch, where they take it and run with it for 8-9 years, at the end of that 9 years, that console will have probably the greatest console library in video games, at least the greatest first party library in video games.
I would just like to see Nintendo be able to compete on a larger scale again. Because, like I said, since the GameCube, they haven't really been able to match third party with the other two.
Yeah.
And, like, with looking at Nintendo, like, they've had touch and go support from third parties in the past. I mean, the Wii had a lot of third party, but it wasn't the same third party support. Like, they had tons of stuff from Ubisoft, but it wasn't like they were getting Assassin's Creed or stuff like that. I would see, like, for me, Now, I think Nintendo is great, and I give them a lot of credit for having a consistently strong first-party output and also trying different things with their hardware. But my problem that I've always had with Nintendo post GameCube was really just the fact that they seem like a company that's very stuck in the past. Like I mean this as like with love for Nintendo, is that they they innovate in terms of hardware, but at the same time, you don't really see them ever trying to push forward into the way the industry is now. And I get that it's like now each of the different manufacturers all have their own little niche. Xbox is trying to go for they're not necessarily just going for the hardcore gamers. They're going for the Game Pass and trying to get casuals as well as hardcores, kind of being that one-stop. Yeah, being that one-stop shop. PlayStation's trying to cater very hard to the hardcore crowd, and Nintendo's focusing much more on casuals and kids. I get that. My thing with Nintendo though is I think they are a company much like how Disney has been doing now, where they are basically floating on nostalgia. Is if there was, because kids like Nintendo nowadays, I do think that. But if you ask a lot of kids nowadays what their favorite games are, and like console, most of the time if you ask them, they're probably going to say they have a PS4. Like a lot
they're
of
gonna say Minecraft and they're gonna say Fortnite.
Yeah, like Minecraft, Fortnite, Call of Duty, that kind of stuff. Most of the games that kids are playing now, like you can get them on Switch, and I think crossplay helps this too. But I think from what I've heard, and granted, it could also be, knowing the people I'm communicating with in my age, it's older kids. I'm not really talking to 6-year-olds, but it's the thing is that I think from what I'm seeing, a lot of people who are still buying Nintendo are the people who grew up with Nintendo and not necessarily the kids of today. Similar to what I'm seeing with Star Wars. Yes, there are kids who like Star Wars, but a good portion of the people who I see excited for it are the kids who grew up with it in the 80s and us in the 2000s. I don't see a lot of, modern day kids going for it the way they do Marvel. I see the same thing happening with Nintendo. There are kids who like Nintendo, but their core audience, even though Nintendo seems to think it's children, they're marketing it to the people who are buying Pokemon and who are buying Zelda are not necessarily children. It's people who are like 18 to 35 are like the core audience who's buying this stuff now.
Yeah.
And I think it's Nintendo that nostalgia works. As we've seen with Disney, that is a very lucrative business model. But the downside to it is you can't ride on that forever. And Nintendo, I think they realized that the casual market would not sustain them forever with the Wii U, because that they tried to coast on the whole, let's play commercials on Disney Channel and kind of just market it as this like kids machine. But by that point, kids no longer really cared because the audience who was interested in the Wii had grown up. And I think that's the thing is Nintendo doesn't grow up with its audience. They stay firmly in the past. And for nostalgic kids, that may work, but invariably a good portion of that child audience is going to grow up and move on to, like, if they're casuals, once they grow up, the casuals more than likely are just going to play games on their phone, or maybe a couple on go back and play the Wii a couple times. They're not going to be the type who are going to go out and buy another system, usually. And the kids who grew up and became big-time gamers and became more hardcore, yes, they'll probably buy a Switch, but a lot of the games that now that they're grown up that they're going to want to play, Nintendo's not carrying as much. The Switch is starting to correct that somewhat, but I would like to see Nintendo be able to compete. Because PlayStation and Xbox, for example, they're going for somewhat different audiences, but they can both compete in terms of output. They have similar crossover appeal. The Switch is basically is going right where the others go left, but at the expense of that, it's not sustainable. I don't think. Like once these kids that are like people our age, once we grow up to a point where Nintendo is no longer something. I mean, I'm not saying that's going to happen to everybody. I guess I'm kind of talking in circles, but ultimately what I'm trying to say is I think Nintendo can only coast on nostalgia for so long, and I think the Switch is a step in the right direction. But I'd like to see them be able to compete not only in terms of hardware power, but also in terms of broad appeal. Because they're only appealing right now. They think they're appealing to children, and I'm sure there are children who are buying Nintendo stuff, but most of their core audience seems to be nostalgic adults around 18 to 35. And I don't think that's a sustainable business model because once the kids that are kids now grow up, they're not going to be as nostalgic for Nintendo because they weren't catering to them. And nostalgia can only work for your business for so long before you have to start trying to compete with the others. And PlayStation has always understood that. They have their nostalgic games like your Ratchet and Clanks and your Jack and Daxters, but every time they get a new console, they'd start having a new flagship title. You'd have your, look at Naughty Dog, for example. They started with Crash, then they did Jack and Daxter, then there was Uncharted, then there's Last of Us. Who knows what the PS5 is going to bring? That they're constantly innovating. Xbox is basically going the PC route and basically saying we're not even a console anymore, we're just a platform. And Nintendo's just been trucking along doing the same thing since like 2000, and it's not gonna last them forever. And I thought the Wii U was a good lesson in that, but the Switch is somewhat backtracking into that, and it worries me that they're going to be like, well, they have third-party support, but now they're just basically resting on their laurels, and I'd like to see them maybe be like, okay, well, for the regular crowd, we've got, the Switch. And then if you want to get one for your kids, we got the Switch Lite. But if you're a really pro gamer and you want to get the big high-profile games, but you also want to be able to play Mario and Zelda, get the Switch Pro, which runs at 4K, 60 FPS, but you can only play it docked or something like that. Like, I think that's something that would be smart for Nintendo to do, is do like Xbox by having the Series S and the Series X to cater to different groups. Do that. Have a Switch that is docked only, that is much more powerful, catered to the hardcore crowd. Have the Lite to go more to the children, and have the regular base Switch be the Switch for the general mass audience. I just think Nintendo needs to get their head out of the sand and realize that it's not sustainable the way they're going. But at the same time, as long as they keep making good games, I'm going to be on Nintendo's side because they've been able to make it this far, and I love the company. I would just like to see them do more.
Yeah, I'm with you. I want to see them push very hard to make their games compete, because they are competing. Breath of the Wild directly competes with Horizon Zero Dawn, and there's no escaping that. Like, whether or not you think one game is better than the other, they're the same thing for their respective console manufacturers. So yeah, I just think there's yeah, I agree. I would like to see them try to push more into the way the games industry is going rather than fall back on where they currently are. And maybe they could do that, but the fact is the Switch is either going to be the only thing that they sell for a very long time, or is going to be a one and done thing that they then have to find another innovation, right? And I don't know how many they have before VR takes over the entire industry. So
yeah, and it seemed like for them, portability was going to be a big thing, and then COVID happened and really kind of put a dent in that.
Well,
So
and it's even worse because now there's this whole like, is Pokemon really a console game? Sword and Shield? Like,
yeah,
it kind of is, but it doesn't really feel like it. Like, is Bravely Default 2 a console game? Like, you're gonna try to tell me that's a console game that I'm looking at when I watch that trailer? Like, no. And you're still selling it for $60. And yeah, it's just it is weird. It's super weird how the Switch kind of confuses the whole thing. So, we'll see. I miss the handheld console divide quite a bit. But
thanks for coming
yeah,
to my TED Talk.
yes, exactly. Um, all right, so let's move on. Oh wait, no, there was one last headline. We didn't get to this. Splatoon 3. Do either of you care about Splatoon?
No.
Okay, we don't have to talk about it. Splatoon 3, be excited for it if you're excited for it. Maybe I'll get it. I'm not against it. I just didn't really care that much about Splatoon 2, but we'll see. All right, let's move on then. We have two more topics for you because we were really scraping the bottom of the barrel this week. So uh so Persona 5 Strikers came out yesterday. Well, no, today technically. And that's only if you got the digital deluxe edition, which I did because I was like, hey, I want to play it early. Um and I have played like 3.5 hours of it, so I don't have any idea of how good it is or anything like that. My first impression is pretty positive, but other than that, there's just really no way for me to gauge properly whether or not it's a worthy sequel to Persona 5. However, I was thinking, Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity really left a sour taste in my mouth on Warriors style games, or Muso games um as is the genre. Um so I was like, hey, I want to play one that people liked. And I landed on Fate Extella Link because it's the sequel to Fate Extella the Umbral Star, which itself is a like soft sequel to a spin-off. So thumbs up on that. Um and I've talked quite a bit on and off this show about how much I loved Fate Stay Night, Unlimited Blade Works, and Fate Zero. So I was thinking, you know what? I'll pick this up and see if I really like it or not, and see if it's any good. I found myself really enjoying Extella Link. I thought it was really solid for what it was. And I didn't like 100% it or anything like that. I just played like basically the bare minimum to finish the story and get all of the endings. And the story itself is kind of weak. Like, there's not a lot there, which isn't great. Like, the Fate series has always been lauded for being at least relatively interesting story wise, but this game really didn't do much. It was kind of like a setting for the action stuff to happen, which is fine. I'm not super against that, but it did feel like it felt really lax on the story. It just didn't really feel like it was there. Um with but where I thought the game really excelled was in the gameplay. And I think there were a couple of wrinkles that I really enjoyed that enhanced the experience so much that it made me like it made me sure that, even though Muso games aren't ever going to be my favorite genre, I can still get some enjoyment out of them. So there are two main mechanics here, and then one thing that is very different from Age of Calamity that I think matters quite a bit. And so I'll start with that. I think the main thing that's different about Extella Link and Age of Calamity is that the power scale to the amount of bosses is much more in your favor in Extella Link.
Mm-hmm.
And for a Muso game, I think that's in my opinion, I think that's very important because in Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, the tedium didn't just come from the fact that you were killing the same bosses over and over again. It's that they were kind of hard to kill. Like especially some of the later bosses could take you a while to kill and you could pretty easily die if you weren't paying attention. So it started to feel super repetitive because you were just doing the same actions over and over again to the same bosses. With Extella Link, that's not really what's happening. You have all of the bosses are basically function exactly the same, which is you could either take or leave. It's not necessarily great game design, but it is at least consistent. And there's a much greater focus on uh on going between points on the map and capturing bases than there was in Age of Calamity. Age of Calamity was much more boss focused, which, Extella Link did have a lot of that, and I think it's fair to criticize it for that. But those bosses were far less annoying to fight, and the the mechanical differences between Extella Link and Age of Calamity really enhance the experience of fighting a boss itself. So I think that's something ultimately that and the characters are significantly more powerful in Extella Link than they are in Age of Calamity, which I feel like is always the pitch, kind of the pitch for a Warriors game. It's not the real-time strategy stuff that a lot of people kind of stay in the franchise for. The what sells you on it is the kind of overpowered characters taking on thousands of enemies and succeeding in the end, right? It's that Jackie Chan versus 8 guys and he comes away unscathed feeling that you're supposed to get from it.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like that, and that mattered quite a bit. I never felt underpowered in Extella Link. Maybe I did once, but that was early game, and then I played smart and I won, so it was fine. Um, so there's that really subjective game feel thing that you could really easily contest, I think. But the other two things, the other mechanics that were added, I think really added to the experience. One of them was it's straight out of the East franchise. I don't know which franchise originated it. I assume it's East, but it's basically like they're called active skills in the game. I don't know if that's a great name for them, but basically you press R1 and it pulls up a menu that you use the face buttons for, and whatever face button you use determines what skill you use. And they all do different things. They all serve different purposes. Some of them are used for moving in a certain direction while also hitting enemies. Some of them are for area of effect damage around you. Some of them are for doing like really big single target damage. So there's a wider array of skills, and it really helps make every character feel super different. And I don't know, that wasn't really an issue in Age of Calamity, but the sheer size of the cast, because there are like 26 characters, and I didn't even play as all of them. The sheer size of the cast really makes every character feel unique, and so it's fun finding like who your favorite character to play as is, and then also your favorite skill sets for those characters. So there's that aspect, and then there's also the aspect that's really interesting. That is um, it's the button mash aspect, where there are two instances where it can happen. There's the rush attacks, where you hit a boss enemy with enough skills that they get stunned, and then you basically mash the square button as fast as you can until uh the rush attack is done, and you finish it, and you do a ton of damage to them. And then there's also the clash attack, which is basically the same thing, except you and the boss attacked each other at the same time. So it's like swords clashing, and then they go into like a Dragon Ball Z style sword fight, and then whoever mashed the buttons the most wins, and they get sent flying, and you do a bunch of damage to them. And I was worried the first time this happened. I thought, hey, that's cool. And then the second time it happened, I thought, hey, that's cool. I feel like that's probably going to get repetitive. And it never really did. And I thought that was weird. Like, it never felt super repetitive. And I think the reason for it is that for most of the Warriors games, you're doing one thing kind of over and over, and it's about like changing up that thing very slightly as you go through, so you feel like you're improving over time. And I think adding in that wrinkle of not only the active skills, but then also uh the like rush attacks and clash attacks thing, made it so that I never felt like I was only ever doing one or two things. I always felt like I was at least working towards, hey, I want to, stun that guy so I can do a bunch of damage, finish him off, and then, maybe I'll be able to use my super over here, and then maybe I'll have built up my like ultra super for the next map, or something like that. And so I felt like it all really came together nicely. It ran significantly better than Hyrule Warriors, which makes sense. It's a PS4 game running on a PS5. Hyrule Warriors is a PS4 game running on a PS3. And yeah, I think it just kind of all really came together. I think preference is definitely going to be involved. I think if you liked the bosses in Age of Calamity, you're probably going to prefer Age of Calamity over Extella Link. But for my part, I thought mechanically what they did with Extella Link made me really hopeful for other Muso-style games I would play in the future. Persona 5 Strikers specifically, even though they're not made by the same team. And I'm really enjoying the combat so far. We'll see if I still enjoy it 40 hours later. But yeah, I think just to cap this off, I think calling all Warriors games the same is not a fair criticism, because the original Hyrule Warriors is very different from Fire Emblem Warriors, is very different from both Extella games, are both very different from Age of Calamity, and no game in of all of those games, no game is quite like Persona 5 Strikers for my money. So they're all very different, and I think writing them all off because you didn't like one of them might be a bit of a mistake, just because you might be missing out on an experience you really liked. So that's part 2 in this trilogy. Hopefully next week we'll be able to complete the trilogy and get to the good stuff. The good stuff is Persona 5 Strikers, because it's a true sequel to Persona 5. It's it's kind of cramming in Persona 5 mechanics into a Muso game rather than the other way around, where a Muso game is adopting mechanics from its home franchise. So we'll see. And with that, I think that moves us into our final topic for today. Caleb, this is one that you are very passionate about.
I am super passionate about this. It is something that has been, honestly, it's been in the making since early October.
Oh man.
Like, this is something that I've been wanting to talk about, and I hit my breaking point a couple weeks ago where I'm like, we got to talk about this now, because it's something that,
You have to do it.
Yeah, we got to talk about it, and that is something that is new. It is a newer thing with how media approaches this. So it's kind of like me complaining, but also me, trying to put the PSA out of like, hey, maybe stop
Hey,
doing
don't do
this.
that.
Right. And that the fact of the matter is, with Disney Plus coming out with new content on the weekly with such a massive scale, and obviously television has been on for a really long time, and but nothing aside from Game of Thrones, you know, has had this type of massive scale. And we look at and I remember Game of Thrones being a struggle. Like, that final season, I had to watch it live, but at least it was you could at least watch the show live, because it was at a decent hour um, for everyone to watch. It was prime time. Whereas Disney Plus releases their stuff midnight Pacific Standard Time, which is 3 a.m. for the East Coast. Um, and that proves to be quite difficult for many people on a on a Thursday night into Friday, because, and then you get news companies just flooding with articles and spoilers.
Check out this
Exactly.
WandaVision reveal.
Right. Or of like, WandaVision reveal could lead to is going to impact everything, and what I mean by, like, say, WandaVision reveal, we're being generous for not spoiling it to you all, but I'm just saying, these companies will actually say it.
Yeah. And that's the thing, I think, that that needs to be understood, is not the fact that these spoilers are out there, because you can't stop people from talking on Twitter. This is not going to happen.
Right.
But
that's the
big
thing.
problem. Well, go ahead.
I avoid Twitter, and I still get spoiled because these news companies, I could get notified wherever, Google. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I'll still get spoiled. So it's like um this all started really with The Mandalorian season 2. And The Mandalorian season 2 had, we don't need to spoil this, but the had a lot of moments, whether it was character cameos or just plot points. And within hours they would have these everywhere. And I had a struggle of trying not to get spoiled. I got spoiled on the episode 3 reveal of season 2. And then I've also gotten spoiled on the big cameo at the end of the season, the big one. And
Which
I
sucks. You had to have that spoiled for you.
right.
Yeah, that one really bites, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like episode 3, I'd be like, if it happened to me, I'd be like, I wouldn't be happy, but I would understand it. But
Exactly.
having that final thing spoiled for you, that's just cruel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
that's
and this is part of the thinking, to let everyone who's watching know, we haven't been avoiding WandaVision because we don't like it. We have been
Mhm.
avoiding it because we respect you too much. I personally, I've put my foot down on this. I
Mhm.
respect you guys too much to allow you to spoil it for yourselves. And that's really important for me. I think that's really important for you guys too.
Yeah, it's especially important now.
I mean,
Yeah,
like,
like,
really,
episodes 1, 2, and 3, even 4, you could say,
Mhm.
I think we would have watched it, but after episode 5, I think it's become apparent that this is the kind of show that you need to see for yourself, especially if you've been following things for the past 10 years.
like, I think,
And
like, with us, with spoilers, we tend to, like, if we ever do, it's like, sometimes we'll say it beforehand if the thing's been out for a little while, but if it's a recent thing, usually we have an entire episode dedicated to that with spoilers in, like, at the top of the episode and usually in the tags.
yeah, like, we
Like, for
don't
example, like Joker or Endgame or something like that.
we will never post an episode that says, "Look who died in X movie."
Yeah.
Like, that
Exactly.
we're never going to do that. And and I think what you're getting at, Caleb, is that, you know, the fact is that all of these companies, all of these news organizations that are looking for clicks, right? Because that's what they're
Mhm.
looking for. They're not going to be as conscientious of that. And what stinks about that is, we're tiny in comparison, but we don't have as much reach. So even if we did spoil stuff at the top of the episode, it wouldn't reach that many ears.
Mhm.
But like, all of these media companies are going to get shared by your friends. They're going to get, they're going to be in your recommendeds, right? Like, these are all things that you can't avoid
Right.
as easily. If you're on the internet, you can't avoid spoilers anymore.
Yeah, and I think that really gets down to it is the problem. Like you said, you can't really stop two people from talking about the latest episode on Twitter. Like, I mean, once something is out, the floodgates are open, and social media is going to talk about it, especially if it's something as big as this. And with it being a global rollout, you can't help with, like, when the West Coast gets it at midnight, then we're going to have it at 3 a.m. and then the next morning it's everywhere because the people on the East Coast haven't had a chance yet.
Right. And
It's
people got to work at, like, say 8 a.m., 9 a.m.
Yeah.
It's very common. So it's like, I know for me, I'm getting up at 6 a.m. So it's like I can't stay up and, like, watch Wanda. I can't stay up and watch the 3
Yeah.
a.m. drop. You know what I mean? Because by the time it's
Yeah.
done, it's 4 a.m. and I'm down to 2 hours of sleep. It's just
Yeah,
not possible.
like you can't control the social media aspect, but I think it comes down to my biggest problem with this, and I know for some people listening to this who know me, I'll sound like a broken record, but the problem is the media.
Mhm.
It's your IGNs, your The Verge, Screen Rant, stuff like that, who is just minutes after the episode drops in order to maximize clicks. You've got guess who died in this, or this character could appear in this, or what happened. You'll never guess what happens this week on WandaVision with
Right.
like a vaguely blurred silhouette of a character in the thumbnail.
Yeah,
And
it's
it's
like
just
yeah,
yeah.
that's my favorite right there. Is when they
Yeah.
have when they have a really bad like it's like guess that Pokemon except it's super
Oh yeah.
obvious where they
Well,
totally silhouette the person, but it's like, that I can obviously tell that's say Wolverine or something. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like
Which I should clarify for the audience listening. Wolverine, that's not a spoiler.
no,
That
no,
was
no,
just
no,
making a
no.
joke there.
That was full on like left field joke
Yeah.
because
I
yeah.
just got to clarify for the audience because I know there'll be somebody who comments. It's like, why did you spoil it?
Yeah, hasn't seen this week's
uh,
episode and then it's like
yeah. But yeah,
but
I think it's. Yeah.
no,
Go
I
ahead.
I just I found after the the cameo at the end of season 2 Mandalorian, I remember being so like, I talked about this in our Mandalorian review of like I remember watching that episode and being like, "Oh, now that I know that this person's going to be in it, when is it coming?" You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it really distracted me from the tone of that episode and the um and it once that person did show up, it was a great scene, but it would have been so much better had I experienced that without knowing. And honestly, I got to see some of that magic through watching it with other people who didn't know, who didn't get spoiled.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of made up for it. But
Yeah.
I thought, Star Wars, it's Star Wars, I kind of excused it off, and then WandaVision happens. And
Yeah.
the first two episodes, objectively, I don't think there's anything you can spoil in those first two episodes. So it was because it's what the show's premise is. It's what you were shown in the trailers, and it. And then you get to maybe episode 3, but even then, it's like we talked about, episodes 3 and 4, and then no, I got spoiled on 4. It actually starts with 4, um, because I did. This is when I actually started to get spoiled. I got spoiled on 2 characters showing up, and I think had I not known those 2 characters would show up, um, I think I would have enjoyed the middle section of that episode a lot better. Um, as opposed to because that episode 4 opened pretty strong. Without giving
Yeah.
that away. And then episode 5, the big one, I got spoiled. Did I? Yeah, I got spoiled on, and that's where
And
I
that's
was
one that like I mean I texted Caleb, like my face melted
right.
watching that. And like there's um I think that this is kind of the crux of it, is that there is no embargo on any of this, right? It's out
Yes.
in the public, and news orgs are going to talk about it. I mean, I really liked the 2-week embargo on Endgame because
Hmm.
I saw it. I didn't need people telling me how it was going to affect the entire, universe as
Right.
we know it, right? Like I saw it, it's fine. I don't need to be advertised about it. and I know a lot of people go to these places for information about what they just watched, but I think having some kind of, at least a week, right? I think 1 week makes sense, because then, like, because it makes sense, because, like, if you're watching last week's episode this week, then that's kind of your fault for missing it by this point.
Right.
But I think that there should be some leeway, because not everyone's gonna watch it the day of.
Yeah, like my issue is I don't necessarily have a problem with like people. We're talking specifically about like news orgs and YouTube channels, and not necessarily like social media posts.
Right.
Like I don't have a problem with like a YouTube channel posting a breakdown of everything that happened in episode 7 and what it could mean for the future. Like I don't have a problem with that as long as there's nothing in the thumbnail or in the title that spoils. Like if you just call it WandaVision episode 7 breakdown, and then you maybe just have a picture of Wanda on the thumbnail, I think that's fine.
Yeah.
It's if you just like, and again, I'm not going to spoil anything, but like if you were to have a thumbnail be like, guess who appears in WandaVision episode 7, and you've got their like barely blurred face on the thumbnail with your generic meme worthy red arrows pointing at them on the thumbnail. It's that's the stuff that I hate, where it's just it feels so like I hate it, because there's stuff that like you can tell the channels that are just talking about this stuff because they enjoy it and want to theorize. Like, I mean, that's basically what we do on this show all the time is we'll watch a show and we'll theorize. I'm like, oh, I wonder how this could tie into this. And well, in Avengers number 175, this character appears, something like that. It's those companies where you can tell the only reason they're putting this stuff out is not because they're excited about it. It's they've delved deep. It almost kind of reminds me of Ready Player One somewhat, like the main company being the people who are like they don't care about the game, they're just there for the profit, and you've got the fans who are like the ones who are trying to play the game. That's kind of how it reminds me here. Is you've got these companies like The Verge and I'm not necessarily trying to pick on any specific website, but those are just some of the big names that come to my head of just I think. Like, if they do a breakdown, that's fine. And if you click on a video that says WandaVision episode 7 breakdown, you should go in with the knowledge that it's going to be spoiled. But it should not be in the thumbnail, and it should not be in the title if there are any spoilers. And if there's going to be spoilers, put a spoiler tag at the beginning of the video in the description as well. It's just being courteous. And now I do agree that once a week has passed from, I think when it comes to a TV show, once a week has passed from the last episode, it's fair game. For a movie, because it's so much bigger, I think if it comes out on a Friday night, or I guess Thursday midnight, and I think you have until the Monday that following that weekend until you can start talking about it.
Sure, that makes sense.
Endgame, I think, was a little overkill because anybody who really cared likely saw it in that first weekend.
Yeah, it wasn't gonna be that hard to go see it that first weekend.
I think, and like if you can't do it that first weekend, I understand, but at the same time, there's got to be a point where it's like 90% of the population who cares has seen it. You can't expect them to hold back after a couple of days of talking about it just because you didn't have a chance. Like, that's basically me talking about social media as a whole other ballgame. But like these companies at the same time, it is their business model. So like I can see why they're doing this. But at the same time, you're still going to get just as many clicks, I would assume, by saying, oh, like WandaVision episode 7 breakdown, and we talk about all the big things this week, rather than just putting a picture of a big cameo character on the thing. It's just, but if we're talking social media, you can't really control that. And like if it was people like with Game of Thrones, like I would, after the episode would air, I'd go on there and there'd be people talking about the events of the episode and making jokes about it. That you can't control. But the fan pages, like who are or like, for example, if you follow an MCU fan page on Instagram, and
Mhm.
you just be happening to scroll through, just happen to be scrolling through Instagram, and then a picture of a big time character pops up on there, that sucks because it's a fan page and they know the people who are following care.
Mhm.
Like it's that's a different case than somebody just your uncle on Facebook spoils the Force Awakens for you on there and you can't control it. That's different than like a specific fan page or a thing doing that. But
and
I
and
think
the
you also hit on this earlier, Caleb. I
Mhm.
think it was you who said it, was that there's the problem now with Game of Thrones. It was you had a pretty universal time. It was 9 o'clock on HBO. Everybody could tune in and watch.
Right.
It wasn't like obviously you could watch it on demand later, but there was a dedicated central time where people could tune in and watch it together, and then it was kind of understood. Okay, after 9 o'clock on Friday, or I guess Sunday, after 9 o'clock on Sunday, if you don't want it spoiled, don't turn on Twitter.
Right.
Whereas, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I full on was like it was such a different experience because it premiered, and like it was like the moment it ended, it was like, all right, we can, the people that like genuinely had a chance to watch the show and like can go on, and if you know you're missing it by you're only going to be like an hour or two delayed. I don't think that there was ever an opportunity when I was watching Game of Thrones that like I wouldn't go past like 3 hours without have watched the
Yeah,
episode, and in that time I would just stay off. I would just stay off my. I'd turn off my phone. But
yeah,
what happens with WandaVision and the Mandalorian is like these posts will come out almost immediately, like within a couple hours, and I will wake up to them. I don't even get a chance. I will check my phone to turn
yeah,
on. There could be some world event going on or something, and I'm like, oh, I gotta check on this, and then inadvertently get spoiled on such and such, and the I think what the main thing is it's partly it is mostly on the media. Like the blame is mostly on the media,
Yeah, it's
but
media and big YouTubers.
it is also on Disney Plus as well. I think because they should be the ones enforcing an embargo of a certain amount of times. They should be the ones that are changing up the release time. um
yeah.
Yeah,
I agree
making
with
it
that.
not midnight would be smart.
right.
Yeah, which I agree with that, but I'll tell you why they're not doing that. It's
Because of Game of
because it's
Thrones.
gonna get them the publicity.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know, like why would they say, "Oh, hey, IGN, you can't talk about the end of Mandalorian until a week later," because by that point, a lot of the big, shock from it will have died down,
Right.
and that means that less people are not going to be like, "Oh, I got to turn on Mandalorian right now." So that's the reason I think why Disney and then HBO and all these other platforms aren't doing that, because it in turn helps them. It may frustrate the fans, but when everybody posts all at once, you won't believe what happens in this week's Mandalorian. Everybody's gonna be like, "Well, man, I need to go turn that episode on right now." Disney wants. That's why they're doing this week to week stuff in the first place.
Right.
They could drop it all at once, but by drip feeding an episode every week, you then have the whole, endless media machine crank out all the different articles and recaps they can, which keeps the excitement, the hype train rolling. And that's part of what it is Disney could, but like put out an embargo or change the release date time, but they're not going to, because they're going to
Right.
rely on that media hype machine to keep them going. And that's the problem, is it's this endless media nightmare of just like it feels like almost like they're actively trying to make it so you can't enjoy it. I'm like, sometimes I just want to watch the episode and then maybe watch a couple of my favorite YouTubers who are just fanboys talk about it and have fun with it. Not 10 minutes after the episode airs, I go on and there's breakdowns and recaps and all these things that just feel like they're just trying to maximize clicks and not necessarily be this, hey, let's have a couple of fans come into the comment section and talk about it. Yeah. That's what irks me, is it doesn't feel like it's a community who's just trying to talk about it. It feels like it's this attention-grabbing kind of money-grabbing kind of attitude, and not so much communal, hey, let's have our metaphorical drinks and kick back and talk about the episode. That's what bugs me, and I'm like, I know better than to like people, because most people I follow on social media are fans of the same stuff that I am. So I know better than to like turn on Instagram because I know I'm gonna see spoilers for what just came out. But when it comes to these media companies, it doesn't feel like it feels like it's for a different reason, and that they're actively wanting to spoil because it's going to maximize their clicks, and Disney's not going to stop them, or whoever the company is, because that in turn is going to get more publicity for whatever's happening. It also kind of sucks now that the culture has kind of changed around these things, and Game of Thrones was kind of the start, but Game of Thrones prior to this was not, like, prior to it getting big, it was like the first big kind of modern day hyped week to week TV show. Like, I guess kind of The Walking Dead as well, but that also didn't have the same amount of reach.
Yeah. Right.
But,
and I think that hype for The Walking Dead only lasted a couple seasons, whereas
yeah, that kind of died out around season like 7 ish.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's a legitimate question about like how discussion of media has changed since the dawn of YouTube, really. I mean, YouTube has opened the floodgates on media discussion in a way that we don't quite understand, really. And what that kind of means is that you can't expect the same thing that you used to, and that's reasonable, but there is a lot of stories, right? Not just M. Night Shyamalan, but like Usual Suspects, or any number of these things.
The Force Awakens was a big one.
Yeah, like all of these things are built on the idea that there is some sort of mystery or something that isn't explained that will get explained and stuff like that. That if you have it spoiled for you beforehand, it will perhaps lessen your experience of the product. And there's a legitimate discussion to have about whether or not everything should be leaning on it as hard as it does, but that's kind of just the way of things. And for there not to be some way for people to enjoy the media that they want without having to go totally dark on everything in order to enjoy it seems it just strikes me as like contradictory, I guess. Like, you're trying to have these big spoilery moments, but you're basically gatekeeping them to only the people who saw them first. And that just doesn't strike me as making any sense.
Yeah. And like it's the clash between, we're kind of in this weird era where, like, as you guys said, like, media discussion has changed, and we're kind of caught up between the people like us or your small time YouTubers who just, they don't put the spoilers in the thumbnail or the title. They just, and they say it at the top of the video, hey, we're going to be spoiling this and talking about it, and they just have a good time talking about it, but they don't spoil it. They make sure people are warned beforehand, hey, we're spoiling. And I think there's a difference between, and the clash between the people like us and those people who are just kicking back in a community and talking about something as long as they've clarified, hey, we're going to be talking about some spoilers. And then there's also this big media machine who is just using this stuff to fuel clicks. And that's the dynamic in how media discussion has changed, is people's love for this content and wanting to talk about it has been co-opted by your big media brands, who are now going to use that as a way to kind of say, hey, we know you love this, and so we're going to plaster it all over your feed for the next week. And it's almost exhausting. It almost somewhat hinders my experience of watching the show. Like, I enjoy, like, for example, shout out, he doesn't need a shout out, but YouTuber I like, Jeremy Johns. He does movie reviews, and every week he does a recap episode and talks about what he thought about the latest episode of WandaVision. Mm-hmm. I like watching this stuff, and I always make sure to watch them after I've watched the episode. And he puts a spoiler tag at the beginning and says, hey, I'll be talking spoilers. And in the comments, people just talk about the episode. It's this nice kind of almost, I mean, he's a big YouTuber, but he's not this, IGN level mega YouTuber. And it's cool to just have that little community experience, almost like, when before we started doing this podcast, of us just like going into the lab and just talking about movies. And it's that kind of communal experience that I liked. But now it's this thing where each week I'm like, great, now I've got the episode watched, my entire feed and every website I go to is just, and YouTube homepage is just going to be filled with, you won't believe in 12 Easter eggs you missed in this episode. And it just gets exhausting that it's just this machine that's fueling it. And it just almost makes me enjoy it less, where I'm like, great, now I got to go to the next 7 days of seeing all these different headlines, where I can't just, sit and watch and then talk with friends. I got to scroll through pages of theories and clickbait and all this other garbage.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I hope that eventually that kind of gets, I don't think it'll ever get lessened. I do think I think some companies are starting to understand the backlash on spoilers in the thumbnail and title. I have seen that start to get scrolled back a little bit. Yeah. I think YouTube is the Wild West in terms of that.
Yeah.
Like I don't think. Yeah.
It's
I don't think you can really safely be on YouTube if you're trying to avoid spoilers.
Yeah. Like, I think stuff like the big websites have gotten better at that recently because they know people are not going to be happy about it. And social media stuff like, Twitter and Instagram, we've already kind of said you can't really control that. YouTube is the case because it's both. It's not just your big time website and networks, but it's also your small time people who are just wanting to chat with their fans who like this stuff. And that's what makes it difficult, is you've got people who are trying to maximize clicks while also people who just want to have discussions with their fans. And then you have those little bits of people in the middle who are just like, I just want to theorize, I'm not going to spoil. And YouTube is kind of the crux of all of these problems. It's not just, the websites are already guilty of it, and people on social media are guilty of it, but those are pretty isolated groups. YouTube is that middle ground where all of these different groups converge, and it's just like a Wild West to kind of navigate.
Oh yeah. And I don't think this is going to be a problem that is fixed anywhere near overnight. I think I think it's unfortunately here to stay. I think there's no avoiding it, but I do want to. The reason why I wanted to talk about it is because I'm just so fed up with it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I know going into these next 2 weeks. Now I've been lucky these past 2 weeks, like the episode 6 and today's 7, I wasn't spoiled on any plot point or anything, which I'm really thankful for. But keep in mind, last week I had my phone off. I literally turned
Yeah.
off my phone. This week we had the day off today. You know, um, so it there was I had a chance, to not get spoiled, and that's different. So now I know. Now the problem is going into these next 2 weeks, these next 2 episodes, um, the the final two. Some crazy stuff's going to be happening. It's pretty much confirmed. We know that this is somehow relating to the greater MCU. I don't want to get spoiled on that. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I don't want to get spoiled on what what that is, on what you know, and I'm getting nervous that, like, I don't know how I'm going to avoid it. I know next Friday I should be fine, but I think the Friday after it's going to be really tough because I don't know if I'm going to be able to watch the episode um until really late that night, because obviously um real life stuff is going on and stuff.
Yeah.
And then we get into Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and like I was telling uh Ezra and Sawyer before the podcast, I'm in production. I'm not going to be getting to Falcon and the Winter Soldier right away. And I know I'm curious because I haven't asked him, but I'm curious as to what Ahmad has seen or heard, because I wonder if he's been. I assume he's not caught up because he's definitely in production right now. He's in production, so it's like I don't. I hope he hasn't gotten spoiled, but also, unfortunately, as unfortunate as it is, I don't think there is a way to um avoid it, and
Yeah.
that's on the media. But um
It is. It is. Well, and it's again, part of it is you miss a week.
mhm,
That's just kind of the way of things. Like
right.
it can't be held back, right? But there is an aspect to it where it would be nice if you know, if you're super busy or something like that, you can just find a way to not deal with it. And yeah, I think this is going to be a larger conversation as we get more and more entrenched in the digital era. Um,
Mhm,
right now there are so many people who aren't as wired up as people like us are. Um,
mhm,
and so they're not getting spoiled. It's people like us that get spoiled.
mhm,
And uh and so it's not as big of a concern for the artists as maybe it will be even in 10 years. But yeah, right now it's definitely kind of an unsolvable problem, especially with the way that YouTube and the other social media companies are managed. Um, yeah, it's just hard. It's just hard. Do you guys have any like final thoughts? Anything else to wrap up this discussion with?
I would really just say it's like, uh, I mean, we're not in this podcast. We're not really talking to the big companies. If anything, we're going to be talking to the small time people on here. And I would say to those people that if you're doing like a fan page on Instagram or something, just maybe like put like, for example, if you're on Instagram, I see sometimes like on those multi-picture post things, like the slide. I don't know how to call them, but like slides or whatever. Just have the first slide be like a hey, spoilers for WandaVision episode 7, and then you swipe to the next, and then it's the post or something.
mhm,
Or be just don't put spoilers in your tags or like on in the thumbnail or in the title of a video, or a post or whatever. And if you're doing it on social media, just know your audience. Like if you're talking to a bunch of people on your timeline who just don't care about the spoilers, then I guess go ahead. But if you're going to be tweeting to a bunch of people who you know are going to be upset about you spoiling the latest episode, just put a if on Twitter you can't really do a spoiler warning because it's all going to just be right there. But
Right.
just be conscientious, and also don't, because I saw these especially back in 2018 when Infinity War came out. Don't be that jerk who's like, I'm just going to go around when something big came out and just put spoilers in all the conversations, just even in things that are not related. Which, because I remember when Infinity War came out, I would just be in my high school and then people going around being like, did you know blank blank dies in Infinity War? It'll be like, dude, like it came out hours ago. Like it's just just don't be a jerk is the moral of the story.
Yes, don't be a jerk. It turns out most problems could be solved if people decided not to be jerks, but
yeah, it's funny how that works.
Here we are. All right. Yeah, well, I think that's the end of our show for this week. You know, Caleb and I, we have a special announcement, actually, a surprise announcement.
Yes.
I need to learn how to pronounce this, actually. Pronunciation. Here we go.
I don't even think Sawyer knows.
Okay. So
I probably don't. I don't think I know.
So it was announced back in like mid-January, early February, somewhere around there. A lot of big figures in the Kingdom Hearts community are putting together a 24-hour live stream that's kind of just celebrating Kingdom Hearts content. And I was thinking, you know what? We qualify as Kingdom Hearts content creators because we talk a lot about Kingdom Hearts on this show. So I don't have any hard details just yet, but we will be participating in the March Caprice Kingdom Hearts live stream. That will be on March 27th. Again, I don't. We will have a specific time slot. I don't know when that time slot is, and I don't know how long it will run for. But yeah, we'll be participating in that. It'll be really fun. You'll get to see a lot of different content creators who maybe you do know, maybe you don't know. It depends on how deep into the franchise you are, but it is a really good opportunity. I was really glad to hear that they did accept us. And yeah, I'm looking forward to doing it again. March 27th, mark it down. And yeah, look out for that. It'll be a lot of fun, and there'll be a lot of cool things to watch there, I'm sure. So
maybe my initial playthrough could be part of that. We'll have to see.
No, there's definitely a way we could definitely try to find a way to fit something like that in. We'll have to see.
Oh yes.
But yeah, that's basically all the housekeeping I have. I think the other major thing is March is looking to be kind of generally kind of a minefield for us this semester.
We're going to be improvising.
Yeah, we're going to be improvising. I wouldn't be too surprised if I came back. I think we're not doing a show next week, but like coming back 2 weeks later and being like, "Hey, this is our last show for like a month." And then just waiting on that.
Yeah.
So, be on the lookout for that. There again, not a lot of super hard plans for that, but just to put in the warning before we go on hiatus and be silent for a month. Ahmad, hopefully Ahmad will be free. His production is ending this weekend, I believe, at least principal production.
Post won't be done, but shooting will be done.
Will not be done for at least 2 months.
Yeah, and that's being generous.
Yeah, it'll be quote unquote done by the time it premieres, but then it will continue to get edited until Ahmad feels like he's done with it.
In the words of George Lucas, films don't release, they escape.
That's pretty accurate. I mean,
and
I would say some films release.
Well, I mean, he mainly was talking about how like they're just ripped from your hands. You want to continuously tinker with them forever. Which, if you've seen the special editions, you understand.
It's true. It's true. That is a fact.
Yeah, and we are all like really proud and honored for Ahmad to be doing this production.
Yeah, it's super cool.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I've been on set, but I was on set the first weekend. I'm going to be on set for his production. I guess when this episode goes up, it'll be this upcoming weekend. I've been very impressed by how well this shoot has gone. So it's shaping up to be something really, really neat.
Yeah. And to do all of that inside of a pandemic is even more impressive. So
in a pandemic with a limited crew in the winter.
Yeah, it's insane. It's insane. It speaks to how good Ahmad is at what he does and how good Ahmad is just in general. So give him all your love. Hopefully everything turns out. Hopefully he gets to make the movie he wants to make in the end. And yeah, and Caleb, you have a production coming up yourself.
Yup. About to go into casting next week, and yeah, I'm quite excited for it. It's going to be good.
Now, will this be live in person, or is it going to be a streamed one?
It will be a streamed one with a it'll be a streamed one. Details on that is it's still.
I'm sure that's a whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah, but I'm excited. It's going to be fun. I've been really rolling out the work on it, and it's quite special. And under the circumstances of COVID, I think we're going to make we're going to make it work. It's going to be good.
It's awesome.
It's brought up obviously some stuff that is like some roadblocks, but it also has provided a lot of out of the ordinary opportunities, and I'm happy for that. I'm really excited. Yeah,
that's good. That's good.
So
all right, well, I think that's it. Sawyer, will you do us the honors?
Sure. You can find us on Twitter at Cascade, at CASTCATE, because we're old handle, but you can find us just by searching for the Lab Rats Entertainment Podcast. If you follow us on Twitter, you'll get a notification every time an episode goes live on Podbean. We are also on Instagram at the Lab Rats Podcast. We don't post on there all that often, but you get some good content on there every now and then. And you can find us, in addition to Podbean, on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Twitch.
All right, awesome. Well, I think that's it for our show. Bye.
Bye.